I've been dealing with a rough idle. I already cleaned my mass airflow sensor. It didn't solve the problem. So we're going to clean the throttle bodies. And then we're going to move this and clean the idle air control valve. So here are the tools you need. 13mm socket for the strut bar, some random pliers, some flathead screwdrivers, 10mm, and some hose clamps. So you're gonna have to remove your cabin filter housing. Mine's already off. Then you're gonna have to remove your strut bar. This is an aftermarket Rogue strut brace. And then your intake box, so we can get to the intake manifold. I removed my strut bar. Now I'm gonna remove my intake box. Now unplug the MAF sensor. Now I remove the intake box and filter and intake arm. Now I'm undoing all the connectors that goes into the intake manifold. Use a 10mm to remove the oil dipstick. You'll see a rubber grommet underneath the intake manifold holding on some other connectors. Remove that. And then use a 10mm and remove the 2 nuts on the bottom of the intake manifold. You can just loosen it. You don't have to remove it. With most of the connectors unplugged from the intake manifold, now we're going to remove the clamps. They're pretty easy. You grab your pliers, you squeeze it, and then you apply it with a flathead. It should come off really easily. So I just did the first 2. Now you have to do cylinder 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now squeeze and pull off this connector and any other connectors you see at the bottom of the intake manifold. With all the connectors off and everything unplugged, we're going to wiggle the box out slowly. Watch out for the hose that drains to the oil pan. Here's the bottom of the intake manifold. 2 10mm nuts holding the bracket. Some connectors for the hose. There's the oil pan drain hose. And if you have an SMG, watch out for the fluid. So we're going to clean the throttle bodies. And then we're going to move this and clean the idle air control valve. Remove these clamps till we get to the idle air control valve. Just remove the clamp above and below the idle air control valve. You don't have to remove the other one. To remove the clamp, use 2 flathead screwdrivers, 1 pushing and 1 prying. Now remove the connector that goes into the ICV. And then remove the 10mm bolts. Now pull off the entire unit and unplug the last remaining connector. So now we're going to clean it with some throttle body cleaner. Spray both sides, let it soak in for a little bit, shake it, and then dump it out. Do this several times, get it nice and clean. Once it's clean, you should be able to hear this. Now we're going to clean the throttle bodies. These are pretty dirty. So we use a spray into the throttle bodies. Let it soak for a few minutes. And then use a paper towel or a microfiber towel. Spray it on that. And then scrub it with your fingers. Spray a little bit more. And then keep scrubbing. So this one's clean. The other one's still dirty. Now we're going to open the butterfly, pull this down with your thumb, and then you can see the inside of the throttle body. The bottom and top is still pretty dirty in the inside. I use a roll of tape to pry it open, and I continue to clean the inside with a cloth. This time I'm using a microfiber towel instead of a paper towel because I don't want any debris to drop inside. So the bottom are clean. Now I'm going to clean the top of the plate. So instead of spraying inside, I just spray the cloth and continue to scrub away. So pretty much done. This is as clean as it gets without taking off the throttle bodies and cleaning it inside and out. I didn't want to do that because if you do that, then you're going to have to adjust the springs and there's going to be some calibration. So this is the easy way to do it. So it's pretty clean. It's a lot better than before. Now is a good time to clean your intake manifold box. With everything clean, let's put it back together. The stock clamps on the ICV is impossible to reuse, so I put hose clamps. Reinstall the ICV. Reinstall the screws. Once you have the hoses of the ICV valve lined up, you can tighten the hose clamp. Install the connector to the ICV. Now have the intake box to measure the bottom hose of the ICV. Then I tighten the hose and start connecting it all back together. So here's where I discovered that I broke the hose that goes into the oil pan, and then I have to make my own. So I just reused the fittings, and I just grabbed the brake line hose that I had laying around, and I just inserted it into the fittings. This is not as important because basically it allows blow by from the intake box to drop into the oil pan, but since I have an oil catch can, this is a little redundant. So I installed that connector, and I'm going to install it to the bottom of the box. It goes right there. And I did a manual swap, so my SMG reservoir is empty, but if you have SMG, you might have to look into how that connector goes. So I just lined everything up. All the connectors are reinstalled. The 10mm in the bottom is tightened. Everything is reconnected. And now we're going to address the clamps. Reinstalling the throttle body clamps are actually pretty easy. It just takes time and patience. It's 2 stages. 1 stage, it clicks on. Then use your pliers, squeeze it, and it should click on. Again, fish your clamps through. First stage, screwdriver, hooks on. Second stage, use your pliers, and you should hear an audible click. There. So all the clamps are installed. It just takes time and patience. If it's difficult for you, you can just buy hose clamps and use those instead. Reinstall all the connectors, and I'm going to install my intake box and strut bar. With everything put back together, let's go for a test drive and let's see if this fixes my rough idle. Idle's perfect, no wandering. That's the sound of my lightweight flywheel chatter. So if you're dealing with a rough idle and you're ready to clean your MAF, you might want to clean your throttle bodies and your idle control valve. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.